I had some conversations that gave me a clear look at what's coming for photographers. What I'm about to share is not based on guesses or trends, it's based on what I heard and what I was shown. Think about your own business, what you're building, your workflow, your ideal clients, and where it's all leading. What I'm going to share with you did not come from theory. It came from photographers who have built something that's working, and they shared how they did it. Hey there, Lens Legends, and welcome to another episode of the Portrait Profit Show, where we focus on the business side of photography. I'm your guide. I'm your host, Jim Landers, your guide on the business side. The Portrait Profit Show is brought to you by Digital Pro Lab and Landers Photography School. For Digital Pro Lab, Amanda and her amazing team are going to make you look like a hero. Now, it's because Amanda hires fantastic people who love what they do, career people, not someone who's here today, gone tomorrow. Nope. The people Amanda hires are fantastic. You're going to love the work that they do for you. You're going to love them. Go to digitalprolab.com to find out more about the difference that Digital Pro Lab can make. That's digitalprolab.com. And of course, the show is sponsored by Landers Photography School. This is my company, and I teach both the photography side and the business side. And I invite you to take advantage of something that I have to offer you for free. I'll put that up on the screen right now. What that says, in case you can't read it, is it's a URL. It's a location to my calendar so that you can put yourself on it for free. It's only going to be a 15-minute meeting, so it's not like I'm giving away a huge amount, but still, you can find that at calendly.com, not calendar, calendly.com/photo school /15MIN. That takes you to my calendar. You put yourself on the calendar, and then we talk about you and your future. Now, I encourage you to go to the comments section right now and ask questions or make comments as we go throughout the discussion. And I want you to go right now so that you can enter in #live, letting me know that you're watching us live today on either Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or YouTube. We're simulcast to several different places. For those of you watching the replay, please comment #replay. And if you know another photographer who could benefit from this show, please take a moment and share the Portrait Profit Show with them. I also love it and like it when you hit that like button, hit that love button. Let me know that you like what I'm sharing with you today. And you can do it if you're on Facebook. If you click my face, click the video, you can do it multiple times throughout the video. Well, I want to tell you a little bit about going into the future. You know, there's a sound right before it happens. It's kind of a light, quick breath in, but it's got a lot more substance. I don't know how else to describe it except it to say that every sound you've ever heard compressed into half a second and then absolute silence, not quiet. Oh, no, I'm talking about absolute silence. And I'm at a loss for words, but I could feel it. It was like the silence had mass. Standing there in the moment before this started, before this adventure began, I had a pre-printed out list in my jacket pocket. I'm Jim Landers. I make lists. I've been making lists since before some of my students were born. All right. Now that you know that, I also have my phone with me. I didn't know whether my cell phone service would work when I got there. So I printed out a list of certain things, especially questions that I wanted to ask. Things that I had to see with my own eyes were also on the list. Now, in case you're wondering, not politics, but I did learn who the president is. But I'm not going to tell you that. I didn't care who won upcoming sporting events. No lottery numbers, though in hindsight, maybe I should have done that. I needed to know more about portrait photographers. Were they still working? Were they thriving? I mean, I spent my entire adult life building, teaching, and believing that portrait photography is a viable career. So was it still standing in 2033? Are the photographers that I thought would still be in business actually still in business? Are they still thriving? I checked to make sure that my list was still in my pocket, probably 6 times before I actually left. My hands were cold, annoyingly cold. And I remember having one completely mundane thought in that moment before I left for my adventure. I wished that I had my green hand warmers, these USB hand warmers. I don't know if you have something like this, but that's what I wished I had with me. Yeah, that's what crossed my mind at the threshold of one of the most extraordinary things that I've ever had the fascinating opportunity to do. No profound thoughts, just I should have grabbed those hand warmers. My hands were cold because of anticipation, excitement. I wasn't scared. I wasn't concerned. I've been telling photographers for years to have the guts to fail, so I was ready. Chapter 1. They call it the landing. It's not dramatic. You don't materialize in a flash of light. No little sparks. No sparkling lights like in the transporter room in Star Trek. No. One moment you're somewhere familiar where you started, and the next, well, you're not sure. And the biggest immediate challenge is that your equilibrium is, well, it feels like it's gone, but it's just off just a little bit for a moment. I stood completely still on a sidewalk for what felt like a full minute. It wasn't that long, but I was letting my eyes adjust and my stomach catch up. You know that feeling on a drop on a roller coaster? That. I was in downtown San Antonio, the year 2033. For those of you who don't know me, San Antonio is my hometown. So I was immediately familiar with my surroundings. The air smelled like a city morning, coffee somewhere close. I was still in my city just another year. And that's when my emotions hit me. I stood there on a sidewalk, took a step, and leaned against the wall, but I didn't go anywhere. The world had just kept going the way it always does, completely unbothered by every prediction ever made about it. As my emotions settled, I pulled out my list. Yeah, it was still there. I took a deep breath. Actually, it was 2 or 3 deep breaths. I did feel alone. I mean, I'd been alone in downtown before, but this feeling was different. My wife often says we can't go anywhere without you seeing someone you know. This feeling was more like wondering if I would recognize anyone. It was time to go looking for photographers. Before I share that with you, I should probably share a bit of Q&A. When I returned My friends and family asked me some questions. So I'm going to share those with you before I tell you what I learned about those photographers. So one of the questions that someone asked me when I returned was, "Did you go to the Smithsonian to see if your photograph is still up?" No, I stayed in San Antonio, but I actually already knew they had taken it down because they regularly rotate displays. It might go back up again, but I know right now it's down, and I assumed then it would be too, but I wasn't gonna go anywhere outside of San Antonio. Someone else asked me, "Did you see me? And what was I doing?" Well, I actually purposefully avoided family and most friends, although I did see several photographer friends. There was a follow-up question to that one. They asked, "Did they notice anything off with you? Did you tell them what was going on?" If they did notice anything, no one mentioned it. I guess 7 years isn't really long enough for a whole lot of change in how a person looks. I only told photographers that I interviewed and spent time with. And while it was rare, this didn't seem odd to them at all, as if they had seen people do this before. That did make me wonder. I didn't actually ask that question, but that did make me wonder, at least in hindsight. Here's another question they asked: Was everyone driving electric cars? I would say that there were more. It really didn't look much different than today. Although now that I think about it, it did seem like there were fewer cars, like there was less traffic. Someone else asked me, "Did you see any flying cars?" Personal or multi-person drone type vehicles. And you know what? I did see one. But I looked for the reactions of the people around me at the time, and they didn't have much reaction. And they looked up briefly, but so did I. And I didn't want to look like that it was something odd for me to see, or risk the possibility of being found out. And so I did notice that it didn't really seem odd to them. All right, so there's something different. Someone else asked, "Would you go back?" Well, yeah, I haven't planned it yet, but yes, I will definitely be going back, and I will let you know then how it goes. By the way, I've spent my entire adult life in professional photography, and over the years, I've built a business, taught thousands of photographers, and had more conversations about this profession than I could possibly count. I know what it sounds like when someone is doing well in their business. And I know what it sounds like when they're trying to convince themselves that they are doing well in their business. So when I started sitting down with photographers, I wasn't looking for surface level answers. I wasn't looking for what they say publicly. Like when someone says, "How's it going?" "Oh, I'm doing great." No, I wasn't looking for that. I wanted to understand how they were actually running their businesses. What had changed in the last 7 years? What they stopped doing, what they leaned into. And something became clear pretty quickly. The photographers who are doing well didn't get there by accident, and they were very clear about why. Are you guys feeling this? Is this interesting? Click that like button, click that love button each time you hear something you like. And if you haven't already, go to the comments section and enter in hashtag live. Chapter 2. I talked to a photographer who today, here in 2026, has a solid business, uh, doing mostly volume kind of work, so mostly corporate clients and high school senior portraits. She has consistent bookings and dependable income today. It was working well for her, but by 2029, the corporate headshot business side of her business had dropped off so much that one afternoon she just sat down, looked at her numbers, and stopped. I mean, stopped photography. She packed up everything and moved on to try something else. Now, this was in 2029 that she did this. But as we all know, photography has a way of staying with you And she came back to it 2 years ago in 2031. Again, for her, it's 2033. So 2 years ago for her, she came back to the business. So what she does now in 2033 is completely different than what she did before. Before I could even ask her about the change, she stopped me and said something very specific. She said, make sure photographers in 2026 understand this. The shift was real and it happened kind of fast. Waiting until you feel it is the wrong approach. I asked her later what she meant by different, what she meant by the shift, what she meant by what it was she had just said. And she responded, but I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Chapter 3. The photography session became the product. Some of the photographers I spent time with described their work in a way that was surprisingly consistent. They said the photography session had become the product. A few of them used slightly different wording, of course, but some of them called it the experience, and that's what I call it. But the idea behind it was the same. It came up often across different conversations that it was clear that it wasn't an isolated approach. It was a pattern, something I saw with all the successful photographers that I spoke with. I spent time with one photographer whose studio was in a converted warehouse. It had a north-facing light. It had clean lines and a simplicity that felt intentional. There wasn't anything there that didn't need to be there. And when she talked about her work, she didn't start off with the images. She actually started off with how she approached the session itself. She wasn't talking about the prints afterward, yet she did do the prints afterwards. And she talked about how that changed over time. Actually, more than 7 years, but for her, but how that changed over time and more recently than earlier. She told me that the shift didn't happen quickly. The other person told me that it did happen quickly, but for her, she said it didn't happen quickly. It's different for everyone, I guess. But it was clear when she looked back on it that there was a shift. She slowed the session process down. The session became more deliberate, more focused on the person in front of her than on the volume of images that she could produce. Before anyone even stepped in front of the camera, she spent time getting to know them, not surface level details, but who they were, what mattered to them, and what this moment in their life represented. That changed the way her client. They weren't arriving to have photographs created in the way most people think about it. They were arriving to be understood. And that carried through the entire process. The session reflected that. There were fewer images created, but more care was given to each image that was created, and a stronger sense of connection in what was being created. You know, when she talked about her business, the results followed naturally from that change. Her bookings were steady, several months out. And when she raised her prices last year, now again, it's 2023, so this is when she raised her prices last year in 2032, her inquiries actually increased. Now, I've heard people say that before here in today's time, but she didn't describe a shift in marketing or promotion. What she described was a change in the way she was offering what she does and how clearly that was being communicated through the experience that you were going to have when working with her. So what stood out wasn't just that it was working, but how consistent the reasoning was behind it and how compelling it was. People weren't coming to her simply to have images created. They were investing in the experience of being seen, and the images were, and some other things too, but the images were a result of that process rather than a starting point. You know, people today may say, a client today may say, Okay, that's the price. What do I get for that? I didn't see anyone saying that. It's like in that short period of time, 7 years, that people started understanding that the time spent with the photographer is that experience is what they're paying for. That's what they wanted to know more about. Where people today want to know what they get. They want to know how many digital files they're getting, or how many prints they're getting, or is it going to be framed, or just different variables of what do I get for that, as if the photographer has no value whatsoever. That changed, at least with the photographers who I spoke with who were doing well. Now, I didn't actually seek out any photographers who weren't doing well. Maybe they don't get it. I don't know. But of the ones that I spoke with, again in 2033, it seemed like all of their clients understood the value that that photographer brought to them. And that's what they were asking about. Chapter 4. Now, there is a return to film already now in 2026. But there was something else that I noticed, and I wasn't expecting it to show up as often as it did, and that was film. Not everywhere, and by no means was it replacing digital. No, not at all. But clearly more present than it is right now. The photographers who were using it focused on what it changed for their clients. So I watched another photographer as he loaded an old Hasselblad before a session and explained to the clients that there were 12 frames. He was kind of quick with the explanation, and I think he was more doing a review because the client seemed to understand what he was talking about. So I think he probably had a visit with them ahead of time and let them know, and this was more a review. But he just told them that there were going to be 12 frames. He was quick with that explanation, and I do think he had already mentioned it to them. He said, once those 12 are used, the session is over. He said it simply, without hesitation, like it was just part of how things worked in the business. It was a family of 4, and their reaction shifted in a way that's kind of hard to describe unless you've seen it happen. It wasn't dramatic, but there was a change in attention. It stopped being about getting as many options as possible, taking as many pictures as possible, and became about making each moment count. There was only going to be 12 of them. So after the session, and by the way, they seemed very pleased with the session. They seemed like they enjoyed the experience. After the session, I went with him over to Digital Pro Lab to drop off the film. Yes, Digital Pro Lab is still around in 2033. And he ordered he had the film processed, and he actually ordered 5x5 prints of each frame. I should mention that there is something new and exciting about Digital Pro Lab in 2033. I wish I could tell you, but Amanda, the owner, asked me to keep it secret for now. She said I could share it in 2033. She actually said I could share it a little bit before that, but I wish I could share with you what it is. But you're going to be excited. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting, and you're going to be thrilled. But that's for later. After we dropped off the film, we left. We grabbed coffee, we talked for a bit, and when we went back to pick up the prints, I noticed the photographer's work wasn't technically perfect. Now, you can kind of get an idea of that by watching what they're doing during the session, but when I actually saw the images, I could see they weren't technically perfect. But that wasn't really what stood out. I mean, yeah, I'm classically trained. Yeah, I've got a degree. So, yeah, I'm going to notice that it's not technically right. But that wasn't what stood out. What stood out was the aesthetic, the moment, the expression, the feeling that, this only happens once. He signed each print. He did that right there at Digital Pro Lab. And then he placed them in a simple black box. It was nice. And then he and I both left, and we delivered them to the client. I mean, this was same day. This mom's reaction, along with her family, made it clear that the process carried meaning beyond the images themselves. It wasn't about perfection. It was about the experience that was represented in those images. Now, something else that stood out to me wasn't just that film was being used, but why it was being used. In a time where so much can be created quickly and easily through digital photography, the things that require effort, that are harder, are starting to carry more weight. The limitations weren't a drawback. They were part of the value that this photographer brought. When everything becomes easy, and I'm saying that because AI is going to make some things easier. When everything becomes easy, the things that require intention stand out. So it made sense when you looked at it that way. By the way, there was another question that someone asked me. They said, "Did you take pictures while you were there?" Okay. Yeah, I did want to, but let's just say there are guidelines to go into the future, and I followed them mostly. I'm going to share with you a little secret. Just one, it's not that big a deal. It's not going to get me in trouble, but I'm going to share this secret with you. You know, the photographer that I just mentioned who had the Hasselblad, he was photographing with film. He let me borrow his digital camera since he wasn't using it. And when we were at Digital Pro Lab, I had a print made. I've seen it. I don't have it. I didn't bring it back with me, but I had a print made. And when no one was looking, I taped it underneath the counter. So I'll show it to you in 2033. All right. So chapter 5. By the way, if you're enjoying this, click that like button, click that love button, share the Portrait Prophet show with someone else. Comment and go to the comment section. Oh, by the way, I haven't gone to the comment section yet. A lot of you, have posted, and I see a lot of hashtag lives. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching that. And thank you for entering hashtag live, letting me know that you're watching the show live. Chapter 5. AI did not replace photographers. So that was another thing that came up in several conversations was AI. It's actually somewhat different than the way we talk about it now. And not the same kind of concerns that you might expect that maybe you're talking about now. The photographers who were doing well were not avoiding AI. They were depending on it. They were using it, but very specific ways. Most of what I saw happened after the photography session. Now, I did talk to a couple about how they're doing their marketing, and yeah, they were using their AI for that. But the photography itself, there really wasn't any AI that was part of the deal. There were cameras that had AI built in, but I didn't talk to any photographers that were using those cameras. The ones I talked to were using it for culling, organization, adjustments, things that you can use it for today in 2026. But that's how they were using it. They were using it. There are new tools that make things a little bit quicker and actually a lot quicker and easier, although it's super quick even right now. But the kinds of tasks that take time were what they were using it for. But those things that didn't necessarily add any meaning to the final result, that's what AI was handling for them. And so their process was sped up because of it. What it didn't do was replace the photographer's role in the process. It didn't decide what mattered. It didn't guide the session. It didn't build the connection in the experience with the clients. One photographer showed me her workflow, and she described AI as removing friction. And that actually resonates with me. I want to remove friction. That's how she described how she used AI. The parts of her process that used to take hours were now handled in a fraction of that time, moments. And that changed how she structured her days. She actually spent a lot less time with her business and a lot more time doing fun stuff with friends and family. Not because she was trying to do more volume, but because she had more time to focus on the parts of her business that she enjoyed and actually mattered. She said that she spent more time preparing for sessions, more time with clients, more time with the final presentation than she had previously. And the work did not feel rushed, even though the process had become quicker, more efficient. What stood out wasn't the technology itself, just how it was being used. The photographers who were doing well weren't trying to replace their role. They weren't trying to take over things that they did or enjoyed. They were using tools to handle the parts of the process that didn't require them so that they could focus more on the parts that did. It fit with everything else that I had been seeing. The sessions were even more intentional than they are right now. The experience carried more weight than they do currently for most photographers. And any limitations were adding value. So the tools that removed friction made space for all of that to happen. Nothing about what they were doing felt like a replacement. It felt more like a refinement. Chapter 6. Let's talk about who is still there as a photographer. All right. So some of you watching this right now have moved on to do other things. You're not in the photography business anymore. You've got a different career. You've got a different direction. I actually didn't get a chance to talk to those who weren't in it anymore. I was able to look at my list and see that some weren't there anymore. Photography had been something that they actually did for a time. I was able to look them up on Facebook. Yes, Facebook is still there. I was able to look them up, and I can see they did it for a little while, but they didn't continue. I'm not going to get specific about that. I'm not going to tell you, at least in this public forum where everybody's seeing it. If you're curious though about your particular situation, I am open to talking about it one-on-one. I don't want to comment about who's still around and who isn't publicly. You can find a time on my calendar if you'd like to continue that conversation. I'm happy to tell you specifically what you are doing in 2033 and what's changed and what things caused your change. I'm happy to talk about that one-on-one for those who I actually talked to, which was a lot, or I was able to look into. Go to my calendar. I'll put that up on the screen one more time. So calendly.com/photo school /15min. And I am happy to share more information about you. There's actually a lot more that I'd love to share on not in the group. So use that URL, put it up one more time, just in case you didn't get it. Do a screenshot because I'm not going to leave this up any longer. And put yourself on my calendar and, ask me what you did over the past several years, what things look like for you in 2033. I've got a bunch more I want to share, but on a private basis, just one-on-one. Now, let's talk about other photographers who were still around, but what they were doing looked different than today. Just a little bit. Things that I could observe, not huge differences, not really at all. The businesses, though, were smaller, not smaller as in making less money. They were smaller in the sense that you were doing fewer sessions and you have become more selective about who you work with. And then there were a few of you who were doing really well. I mean, really well. While you aren't all doing the same kinds of things that you're doing right now, there were patterns that caused me to see why you were doing so well. I could hear it in how you talked about your work. I could see it in how you structured your business. It wasn't something that you had stumbled into. It was something you had built with intention. You were clear about what you offered. You were intentional about how you worked. You weren't trying to be everything to everyone, and you weren't chasing every opportunity that came along. It felt like you were doing things you actually wanted to be doing. That's what I recognized in those of you who were doing really well. So clearly, you had made decisions, and some of those decisions probably didn't feel easy at the time when you made them. You were letting go of certain types of work that maybe you liked, but not as much as others. You were changing how you approached your sessions. You were raising your prices, saying no when it might have been easier to say yes. And those decisions added up. When I look at where you are right now, it wasn't hard to see the connection between how you've been working and what your business and your life have become in 7 years from now. It wasn't luck. It wasn't timing alone. It was direction. Chapter 7. Before I left each photographer, I made it a point to ask them a simple closing question. If you could say something directly to the photographers in 2026, what would it be? You know what? I did not assume that there would be a consistency in the answers, but there was. The answers were consistent in one way that stood out. They didn't talk about trends. They didn't talk about gear or chasing what's new. They focused on direction. Several of them said, now they said it in slightly different ways, but that waiting to see what happens is not a strategy. By the time something feels obvious, you're already behind. They talked about making decisions earlier, about being clear about what they were building, not trying to hold on to everything at once. One of them said it in a way that kind of stuck with me. He said, you don't need more information. You don't need more stuff. You need to decide what you're building and start acting like you actually want it. I liked that. By the way, the person who said that is probably watching right now. But again, I can't get specific with it, but I'll repeat what he said. He said, you don't need more information and you don't need more stuff. You need to decide what you're building and start acting like you actually want it. Yeah, I liked that. Another said that most of the frustration that she felt back then came from trying to do too many things, too many types of sessions, too many different types of clients or kinds of clients, too many directions all at the same time. What worked consistently was narrowing things down and becoming clear about who they worked with, what they offered, and how they worked, how they did their business, the experience. They also talked about something else that mattered or matters. The photographers who stayed in it and built something meaningful were the ones who took responsibility for the direction. They weren't waiting for the market to tell them what to do. They weren't looking what other photographers were doing and trying to one-up them. No. They weren't adjusting every time something changed. They made decisions that led them to the future they wanted and followed through on them. When I asked if there was anything that they would do differently, knowing all that they know now from 2026 to 2033, they all said pretty much the same thing. They would have started narrowing their focus earlier. They would have decided what it was that they wanted for their future sooner. Closing thoughts. You have just heard what I saw, what I was told, and how these photographers are running their businesses. None of it felt random. It didn't feel like luck. When you step back and look at it as a whole, it all points in the same direction. The photographers who are doing well didn't wait to see what would happen. They decided what they were building and started moving toward it. Not perfectly, of course, not all at once, but with intention. And that's the part that matters. It's easy to be busy. It's easy to keep on doing things that feel productive. But without direction, it's hard to know if any of it's actually taking you where you want to go. The photographers I had the privilege of spending time with were clear about that. They weren't reacting, they were building with intention. So as you think about your own business, take a moment and be honest about what you're working toward. I'm not talking about what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, but where what you're doing is leading. Once you're clear on that, your decisions start to look different. They feel different. It becomes easier. It becomes more obvious. The things that become obvious would be the things you say yes to, the things you say no to, the way you structure your time, your sessions, your offers. It all shifts. It all becomes easier. Not because something changed out there, but because you decided what you wanted this effort that you're making to become. Yeah, it was fun going to 2033. And yes, I do intend to go back at some point. It it requires a bit more rest afterwards than the normal vacation or trip. So uh, I won't be going back soon, but I do definitely intend to go back. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. And again, if you want to know more about your specific situation, put yourself on my calendar and I'll let you know how everything goes for you. Yeah. Now, let's take a look at what's coming up next. As you know, you get the Portrait Profit Show every single Monday. So here's a look at the upcoming shows. In 1 week from today, that is April 27th, we're going to be talking about 5 principles every photographer should understand. Patterns appear again and again. This episode explores 5 powerful principles. And you may have heard of some of these or all of these before, but I'll tell you what those 5 are, and we'll get into detail next week when we actually talk about them. We're going to talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect, Parkinson's law, the Pareto principle, Hanlon's razor, and the Landers principle, and how they influence the way photographers think, focus their time, and build strong businesses. Seeing how these ideas connect will help you create a photography career that lasts. That's in a week from today. The week after that, that will be May 4th at noon. This is 12 business truths. Photography grows based on the decisions you make and the standards you set. These 12 business truths will help you attract the right clients and build a business that supports your life. On May 11th, I'm going to be doing an interview. This isn't 100% confirmed, so it might actually happen in June. It's scheduled currently for May 11th, though. And this is an interview with Ayush Arora, and he is the owner of Filter Pixel, which is an AI program that helps you with actually some of the things I talked about today, and something that is very normal and prevalent in 2033. And so I wanted to have him come on and talk about it. Now, I don't think he's been to 2033, but his product is there, and it is probably the most popular product for this particular type of thing. So I wanted to have him on to talk about it. So after a session is over, it feels like the hard part's done, or at least it looks like that from the outside, until you sit down at the computer. So what follows is hours of reviewing, comparing, second guessing, and deciding which images to move forward with and which don't. That part's time consuming. It can feel heavy. It slows down everything else in your business. In this episode, we talk about how to make your post-production process efficient. Again, that is, and I didn't put that up. There we go. That is on May 11th at 6:30. By the way, I think most of you know, but on the second Monday of every month, we move the Portrait Profit show from noon to 6:30 in the evening. That way, some people who can't watch it at noon have an opportunity to watch it once a month. But it also makes it easier to get guests on, because usually in the evening, it's a little bit easier for them than it is during the day. So that is, put it on your calendar. That's 2 weeks from today, May 11th. And then 1 week after that, May 18th, make the best choice obvious. You know, if there is even a moment in your process when your clients don't know what to do next, that's not a client problem. That's on you. This episode shows you how to structure your offers so the best choice becomes obvious to your client. Now, what is the best choice? I'm going to explain that in detail, but the best choice is what you define it as, what it is you want them to do. Now, you may give them more than one option, but you're going to make the one that you want them to do obvious. And I'll tell you one more just to round out the month of May. The last one in May is called Full Service Photography. Now, I want you to imagine, again, this is called Full Service Photography, May 25th at noon. I want you to imagine a roofer handing you a bag of nails and then pointing to a stack of shingles and calling the job complete. You know, that's what happens every time a client is left to figure out what to do with their digital images. So in this episode, I will show you how to guide your decisions so your work ends up as something finished, not something forgotten. Add these lessons. They're free to your calendar. Before you forget, you're busy. You've got a lot of stuff going on. Every Monday at noon, except for the second Monday of each month when we move it to 6:30, it should already be on your calendar because you're going to forget. You've got a life. You've got a lot of stuff going on, but you don't want to miss the Portrait Profit Show. I want to thank you for spending your time with me today, Lens Legends. We had an opportunity today to think through what the future could look like for you. If this helped, if you see your direction more clearly, share this with another photographer who may need to hear it. Click that like button, click that love button. If you haven't already, enter in hashtag live. Thank you, Lens Legends, for your time and attention here today. I always appreciate your time and the effort you make as you build towards your ideal life, using photography as the tool. Keep moving forward, keep growing, and I'll see you next Monday for Landers Photography School and Digital Pro Lab. I'm Jim Landers, and this is the Portrait Profit Show. I look forward to watching you grow. You guys are awesome. Bye for now.